Now LSU is coming off of a shutout win, 62-0 over Army this past weekend. But I actually feel worse about the defense after that game than I did before.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thanks for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on YouTube as well. Just search Locked On LSU in that search bar, hit the subscribe button, and you will not miss a single second of LSU football content. My name is Caroline Fenton. I am your host every single day, and today's edition of Locked On LSU is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, let's get into it because weirdly enough, as bad as the defense has looked all season long, whether it be the 700 yards to Ole Miss, whether it be the defense not being able to get a stop in the second half against Arkansas, whether it's giving up 40 points to Missouri, whatever it is, whatever one of the several data points that we have of this defense just being truly awful, I actually feel worse about the defense now after a shutout win than I did before. And you might be scratching your head saying, why? I mean, I don't think anyone at this point feels like this defense is good by any means. I don't even think that this defense is average. But I feel it's worse than average. I feel worse about the defense now than I did maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, which is saying a lot because I've come on this podcast and talked a lot about how disappointed I am in the defense. Rightfully so. You should be too. I'm sure you are. And it's less to do with on the field play and more to do with injuries. Look, we know that the defensive line has talent on it. We know that Harold Perkins is settling into a role now better than he was maybe against Florida State when they were putting him in on the inside. Square peg, round hole. We know that's not working. We know what the defensive line is capable of. And I think just as much as we know that the secondary has issues. We've known that the secondary has issues. That is an area of concern of this team that we've been talking about since like June. That LSU only had one single scholarship corner return from last year to this season. We knew that this secondary was going to be a concern when it had to build itself up via the transfer portal for the second year in a row. We knew it was going to be bad, and we've seen that it is, in fact, very bad. And what's bad has just gotten worse because injuries have decimated this already thin cornerback room. And it adds even more meaning to what Brian Kelly said before the season. I believe it was at SEC Media Days when he said, look, I think we're about a year away from competing. And what's the difference between now and being able to compete is depth. LSU simply does not have depth at the cornerback position. Let me just rattle off all of these players that LSU has available in the cornerback room. If I miss someone, you'll let me know. Zy Alexander, Duce Chestnut, Denver Harris, J.K. Johnson, Ashton Stamps, LaTerrance Welch, Jeremiah Hughes. If I miss someone, let me know. Well, let's go down that list because you might say, okay, we can work with that. Well, Zy Alexander left right before halftime against Army. Left, he was limping. It looked like either a leg or an ankle injury, and he didn't come back. Brian Kelly postgame said it was a lower body injury because apparently we're hockey now, and it's either a lower body or upper body injury. So Zy Alexander's status is at least in question. Now, we'll get an update from Brian Kelly the next time that he meets with the media. No Monday press conference this week, obviously, with the bye. But next time we speak with Brian Kelly, which probably will be Monday, we'll get an update on Zy Alexander's status for Alabama. So at least Zy Alexander is in question. Duce Chestnut. Well, I don't know what the heck is going on with Duce Chestnut because he didn't travel with the team to Missouri and we haven't seen him since. This is the last that we heard about Duce Chestnut.
Y'all reached a decision with Deuce?
Duce is inactive. He is still on scholarship. He's still on the roster, but he is inactive right now.
All right, so that's a whole bunch of nothing burger. Like, I don't know what's going on with Duce Chestnut. I have no idea. So he's inactive. Denver Harris also inactive. Don't really know what's going on with Denver Harris. I think we can read between the lines there. We can look at context clues. Brian Kelly said he's just not ready yet. The last that we really heard from Brian Kelly about Denver Harris. So inactive. J.K. Johnson, he's been out for the entirety of the season. If you didn't even recognize that name when I said it, I don't really necessarily blame you. J.K. Johnson is a transfer that came in from Ohio State actually 2 seasons ago. And has just been dealing with injuries the whole time. He's dealing with an ankle injury that will likely leave him sidelined for the rest of the season. So out with an injury. Ashton Stamps. He was out against Army, and this was the interesting thing with Ashton Stamps. It was a little bit of a surprise when Brian Kelly said that he was out because Ashton Stamps wasn't listed on the injury report throughout the week, but Brian Kelly did say he would be out because of an injury. So not quite sure what's going on with Ashton Stamps. Again, we'll get more injury news the next time we hear from Brian Kelly. But for now, let's just assume Ashton Stamps is out because he was out this past week. So really, the only scholarship corners that you have available for right now, as everything stands right now, is LaTerrance Welch, a sophomore who's seen some work but limited, and Jeremiah Hughes, who's a freshman who saw work against Army because he had to, because Zy Alexander went down with an injury before halftime. And yeah, you can put true freshman Javian Toviano at outside corner. Sage Ryan has played corner, but those guys, they're really safeties that you're going to have to fit into a cornerback role if need be. So Zy Alexander, Duce Chestnut, Denver Harris, J.K. Johnson, Ashton Stamps. For right now, we can all assume unavailable for one reason or another. So the injuries, the inactives that keep racking up in that position group, they're a concern. It's incredibly concerning if and this is no disrespect whatsoever to Jeremiah Hughes or to LaTerrance Welch, but you're going up against Alabama, one of the most explosive offenses in all of college football. And I say explosive because their deep ball is terrifying. I mean, Alabama's offense is not the Alabama offense of last year. Jalen Milroe is not Bryce Young. But Jalen Milroe also has the ability to just kill you with the deep ball. If you watch the Alabama-Tennessee game this past week, the first play of the second half, you would see that on full display. 79 yards on 2 plays. Got into the end zone less than 45 seconds. Like, that's concerning to me. Because, no, Alabama's not going to be a team that throws the ball all over the yard. Like, they're not Ole Miss. But still, it's a good team that you're going up against. You're going to have to battle in that game, and that's a must-win game if you want to get back to Atlanta. So that's concerning, and that's why I feel worse about this defense now than I did maybe a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Is just because simply far too many players that aren't going to be available for you, or at least for right now, are not available. But of course, as things roll on, we'll continue to update you. But coming up next, since we are at the bye week, I think this is the perfect week for a little bit of an evaluation for everyone: players, position groups, coaching staff, individual people, players, coaches, whatever they might be. So today's a good day for a defensive evaluation. Has this defense maybe, just maybe, gotten a little bit better? Has this defense maybe, just maybe, is it not going to hurt this team as much as it was maybe in the first few weeks of the season? We'll get into that coming up next. So it can be stressful finding the right hire for your small business, but that's what LinkedIn Jobs is for. Because every day, new potential hires can feel like high stakes wagers for your small businesses, but you want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. And LinkedIn Jobs helps find the right people for your team faster and for free. So I work for a radio station, and at the beginning of the football season, we had an opening for a really important and critical position. So we needed to find a fairly inexpensive tool to help us find somebody quickly. So we did that. And LinkedIn Jobs, one of the best parts about it is that it is free, which is so great. And it's incredibly easy to use and to navigate. Just go to LinkedIn Jobs and add your new job. Add the purple hashtag hiring frame to the LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you are hiring. Plus, they've got simple tools like screening questions that make it super easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you want to interview and to hire. We all know that it is so important, especially now that we're getting toward the end of the year, to end this year on a high note, and you need the right people working for your business to achieve your end of the year goals. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number 1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right. Well, thanks again for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Also, this season, this college football season, Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. Every single Friday, Locked On will go live at 10 a.m. Central on every single Locked On College YouTube channel, including this one on Locked On LSU. College Football Kickoff Live will cover playoff implications, the conference rivalry games, and go in depth like only Locked On can, including insight and analysis from our stable of Locked On College hosts covering their team every single day. Find Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday at 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You will not want to miss it. All right, so I'm concerned about the defense and the injuries that are plaguing the cornerback room. But now that we're at the bye week, it's a good week for a little evaluation. Over a halfway point of the season, which makes me sad. Honestly, I'm sad that we're getting so close to the end of the year. But we're over halfway. We've got enough of a sample size to give a true and fair evaluation. And over the last couple of weeks, one aspect of that that's kind of been lingering over my head, and maybe you thought about it too, is could this defense just be getting better? Like, could this defense have found some sort of a breakthrough? And maybe we saw the beginning of that potential breakthrough in the second half against Missouri. First half against Missouri, I mean, they were basically scoring on every single drive. It was miserable. I mean, it looked like a Ole Miss game reincarnated. But in the second half, you still gave up over 200 yards. That's too much. You still gave up 2 touchdowns in the second half. Too many. But in the second half, you started to get a few defensive stops when you needed them. 2 timely sacks. You had the pick six. You had an interception from Harold Perkins earlier in the game. So your defense was at least helping you. It wasn't elite. It wasn't great, but your defense was at least getting stops and making plays. Against Auburn the next week, you only gave up 154 passing yards to Robbie Ashford and Peyton Thorne combined. But also, 154 passing yards, that's nothing. But also keep in mind, that's the most of any SEC team on Auburn's schedule. I mean, we saw Ole Miss's defense. It's not very good. Even Ole Miss was able to limit both of those quarterbacks to less. I think they gave up about 122. So not massive, but when you're talking about 122 versus 154, that 32-yard swing it could be impactful. Gave up 139 rushing yards to Auburn. They've been averaging 186 a game. So, you're holding them to less. You had 2 sacks on the day. Overall, I still, against Auburn, Auburn's offense is not good. They're ranked 101st in all of college football. And you give up more passing yards to them than any other team on their schedule. I have to give the defense like a D plus C minus for the day. Army, you were able to shut a team out. 62-0 shutout. Only give up 42 total passing yards. But keep in mind, those are 2 true freshman quarterbacks, 2 incredibly inexperienced quarterbacks, and a quarterback getting his first start on the season. But still, 42 passing yards. That's you're not going to lose to any team giving that much up, or that little up rather. You gave up 151 rushing yards. They've been averaging 190. And as we know, Army and the service academies, they play the kind of style of football where they just run the ball down your throats. But 3 interceptions on the day. 2 of them came from Andre Sam and a forced fumble, which I think is huge. Forcing turnovers, I think, is an underrated aspect of a defense where we might all look at the scoreboard or the number of yards that were given up. But if a defense isn't forcing turnovers, especially this one, if the defense can't give this LSU offense more opportunities, that I'm not going to say it makes their job harder because it doesn't, because they're just doing your job, but you set yourself up, you set your team up in a better position to win whenever you give this offense more opportunities to score points. And it seems like every single time the offense gets the ball in their hands, they're going to score points. But also to keep that in mind, Army has the 115th ranked offense in all of college football. So you're talking less than 200 passing yards to two of the worst offenses in the sport. So I don't really know what to say about the defense. I think that the defensive front has been better about stopping the run. I think the defensive front has um looks like it's more settled into its assignments. I think that Omar Spates has been better. I still wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more from him, getting a little bit more out of him. I still wouldn't mind seeing more Whit Weeks. Whit Weeks is like cowbell. I need it. It's the only prescription. Harold Perkins looks like he's settling into a role that's better designed for him rather than just sticking him on the inside and hoping he can create plays that way. He's been placed in a position where he is best, which is just floating around doing whatever the heck it is that he wants to do. So I think that the defensive front has looked better. It's felt like they've been able to get better stops, but also grade that on a curve. Look at the recent games that LSU has played and the recent offenses that they've played and take it with a grain of salt. Because while I do think maybe this defense has taken a few steps forward, maybe it's gotten more timely stops. Maybe they're able to limit opposing run games better than they were before. But think about where this defense started. One of the worst in the league. Statistically the worst in the history of the LSU Tigers. So, is it getting better? I guess a little bit. Is it enough? No. Because look at your look at your schedule coming up. You got Alabama in 2 weeks. It's the 79th ranked offense in the country, but like I said, I feel like that's just skewed just a little bit because Jalen Milroe can kill you with the deep ball. They can run the ball down your throats. I mean, Jace McClellan this past week against Tennessee. Tennessee is an incredibly talented defensive front that was able to limit what Texas A&M wanted to do in the run game for the most part. And Jace McClellan ran for over 100 yards on that front. So, I mean, Alabama now, while this offense isn't what we think about with a typical elite Alabama team, like they can still beat you offensively. Florida, 46th ranked offense in the country. Texas A&M, 60th ranked offense in the country. So none of these offenses are necessarily elites. Like you're the number one ranked offense in the country. But still, those are significantly more difficult tests for your defense than Army or Auburn or Missouri that handed you 6 points, 7 points rather, on a pick six. But Missouri has a really good offense. Like no discredit to Missouri whatsoever. That offense is kicking. All right, coming up next, what this defense has to do. What needs to come next for the defense, for some of my defensive concerns to be alleviated just a little bit. We'll get into that coming up next. Do you want to have an absolute blast playing daily fantasy and make money doing it? That is what Prize Picks is for. It's the largest independently owned daily fantasy sports platform in North America, and it's so incredibly easy and so exciting to play daily fantasy sports. Prize Picks is the most fun that I have ever had, and you can win up to 25 times your money this football season. Just pick two or more players and pick more or less on their projected stats and place your entry. So over the NFL weekend, this upcoming weekend, you might look at, let's say, Tua Tagovailoa. That Miami offense is humming. You could say Tua over or under 300 passing yards, and if you get it correctly, then you earn money. It is that easy. Plus, another great thing that I love about Prize Picks is that it's quick withdrawals, so you don't have to wait days or even weeks to get the money out of your account and start spending it on fun things. And it's super easy gameplay with an enormous selection of players and stat types that make Prize Picks the number one daily fantasy sports app. Plus, another great thing about it, they've got the Prize Picks reboot policy, where your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured for NFL games in the college football top 25 matchup. So if you have a player who exits the game in the first half, doesn't return in the second because of injury, then that player is quote unquote rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with injury insurance. It is such a blast. So check them out today. Go to prizepicks.com/locked on college and use code locked on college for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/locked on college and use code locked on college for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, let's get back into it because overall, if I have to give this LSU defense a grade, it's hard to not give them a D minus to an F. I mean, maybe that's harsh, but I think that's the reality. I mean, you're one of the worst defenses in the country. And there's really no excuse, right? Like the secondary has every excuse to be bad. The defensive front has no excuse giving up as many yards as it has. Now, can you feel a little bit optimistic that things could be improving? Sure, I think that's fair. But also taper those expectations because I'm not all of a sudden going to expect that this LSU defense, after the bye week, after looking better in the last couple of weeks, is all of a sudden going to come out looking like the 86 Bears. Like that's just that I don't think that's in the cards for this defense. Now, can it just be not be awful? Can it not be statistically one of the worst in all of college football? I'll deal with that. I mean, like with this offense, the way that it's running, it's the best in the country. So the defense doesn't need to be elite in order to win football games. Just get some stops. Just don't give up 30, 40-yard chunk plays. I don't really think that's asking too much. But we haven't seen this LSU defense be able to do that quite yet. So what does this team have to do? I think it falls on the defensive front. Now they adjusted the defensive scheme, going to a 4-down scheme, meaning they've got 4 up front, 4 linebackers, and 3 DBs in the backfield. So I think that has served them well. It served them better, at least than before the switch. So it's going to fall on the defensive linemen. It's going to fall on the linebackers for a few reasons. Because looking at the teams coming up in your schedule, and no disrespect to Georgia State, but I'm just going to focus on the SEC opponents coming up. Alabama had a really good run game with Jace McClellan. Texas A&M also likes to run the football. Florida, I think, is getting better with running the football. But overall, those are all 3 teams that they can run the football really well. I mean, Trevor Etienne at Florida, he single-handedly can beat you. So I think it's going to fall on them, and I think it's going to fall on getting pressure on the quarterback. Jalen Milroe can get the ball out quick, and I think that's how they found they're going to have the most success is the ball coming out quick if they even throw it at all. So you're going to have to get pressure up front, especially with an Alabama offensive line that's not all that great. So take advantage of that because you got some playmakers and you got some big boys up front that can get pressure on the quarterback. We know they have the ability to do that. It's just the matter of doing it on a consistent basis. So if this defense is going to at least get a little bit better, inches, that's all I'm asking. I'm not asking for yards and miles of improvement. I'm just asking for inches at this point. It's going to fall on the guys up front. It's going to fall on the guys like Harold Perkins and Mason Smith and Omar Spates and the veterans doing their jobs. But that's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every single day. We'll have a mailbag coming up on tomorrow's edition of Locked On LSU.